It is May 1979 and the Cumbria group are having a run out into Yorkshire, Mastiles Lane no less. Now for those of you who are still trail riding, you might see a few differences over this next half hour. For those of you who are no longer trail riding, it might bring back a few happy memories as it did for me. The odd laugh here and there. But in 1979, motorbikes had more or less two shock absorbers, like this SP370. And you didn't need a stepladder to get on them. But two CZs there, one enduro, one trail bike. Little TS125 and what was to become the best trail bike ever made, the DT175. But Yorkshire in those days was really a bit of a bone of contention. Various lanes were blocked off and a certain degree of ingenuity was required. Mind you, a little TL125 Honda didn't weigh very much, so it was relatively easy to get them through gaps like this. But come across those big Suzukis, oh dear. Now this is an interesting bit because it's a long lane, runs under Penny Ghent, and this is a good example of how trail riding does a lot of damage, doesn't it? Look at that grass, not a wheel mark in sight, and the cows are very frightened, aren't they? Aye, should have printed that in the Ramblers Association magazine. Yorkshire's, or was certainly, a very pleasant place to trail ride. Farmers even stopped and talked to you. This is under Whittle Viaduct. Looks quite benign there, does this lane, but it can be an absolute little sod up that hill. But highway, the long contouring lane above Malastang, again lulls you into a false sense of security till you hit the boggy bits. Of course, if you have an old 350 Bultaco, it does help a little bit. I think this is Horsehead Moor, but I'm not too certain. Of course, every run is always, shall we say, interspersed by little fettling sessions. Somebody falls off, a lever goes, or in this case a speedo glass is smashed and have to pick the bits up and try and repair it. But it all adds to the fun. Back in the Lake District, a nice warm up through Grisdale Forest prepares everybody for the delights ahead. Walna-Scar, no less. The first hazard, up to now it's relatively easy, is a rock step. The second hazard is a long stony gully. Two ways of going up this. One you can, as I say, paddle or go for a three in trials parlance, and the other way is to ride with, shall we say, a certain skill. Mind you, then again, it does help if you're riding a trials bike. And the last two riders were ex-trial riders, so it was for them relatively simple, but for lesser mortals it was an absolute little sod, was this. But well worth it, because the view from the top is absolutely magnificent. Of course, a run out with friends makes a nice change. Don't have to be a large group. And on Kendal on this particular morning, it was bone dry, so a quick nip over Stile End. to Kentmere. Down into Kentmere Valley and up over Garban Pass towards Troutbeck. Strange place, Garban. It can change from week to week depending on whether there's any heavy rain. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's horrendous. But the run down towards Troutbeck is relatively pleasant. By the time Grisdale Forest reach, it's covered in snow. But from Parker Moor, once you've got across the bloody thing, it's quite possible to see the Howgills over near Sedbergh. But gradually as you drop down, the snow recedes and it just becomes nice frozen ground. Down to Coniston for a brew. Of course there are problems in the lakes as well with obstructions. But certainly on this particular day, Smardale Fell was quite inviting. For those of you who don't know it, it's more or less runs between Orton and Kirby Stephen. Then a good example of how much damage a motorbike does. Motorbike nothing, tractor horrendous. More obstructions. Burkett Fell is rather nice. This is at the head of Malastang really, and it's the entree, shall we say, to highway over to Hawes. River crossings rather interesting as well. Like you stand for perhaps 20 minutes hoping somebody will fall off. Very rarely do. Another good example of two techniques. Make sure you don't fall off by putting both feet down, and then ride across in a rather superior manner without touching anything with your feet. Little lane near Killington. But not all lanes are wide and handsome. Some of them can be incredibly narrow and a bit dodgy when they've just been flailed. Of course, snow when it's, shall we say, damp, can be a bit of a nightmare. This road or lane has two names. It's either the old coal road runs from Barbendale to Dentdale, or the accommodation road. Relatively easy in summer, but in winter when the snow's down, oh boy, yes. This is the top of what was probably one of the most dreaded lanes in Yorkshire, called Dandra Garth. And this was what's left of the footbridge that you were supposed to ride across. Supposed to ride across. But these little photographs are unique because one of the rare examples of a gentleman called Reg Turnbull from Kendal, who had actually fallen off. And believe me, that was a very, very rare event. This particular gentleman could ride up Walnut Scar on a 350 trials tyre that was as bald as a coot. But the accommodation road, or the old coal road, whatever you want to call it, totally different scene in summer when it's dry. Lovely lane this. I wonder if it's changed much. Refreshments on a run? Well, yes there are. Coffee stalls, toilets, and ice cream vans. And of course, another fettling session. It's the trouble with two-strokes, they do tend to run out of petrol sometimes. This, of course, is your now beloved leader, who has a penchant for exposing himself from time to time. It's funny business though, is trail riding. One minute you're riding along a flat lane, next minute you're on a precarious narrow path. It's always telling yourself, do not dab on the wrong side. Then of course there's mud, water in copious quantities. It's a good way of slimming though. And of course the golden rule is, if you have to put your foot down, try and keep your Wellington on your foot. Otherwise this happens. This gentleman is from Windermere and we'll see quite a bit of him later, but the wellies of course do come in handy, because once your foot's wet it's handy to dip into the waters of Lake Windermere to wash your number plate off. Now snow can be very entertaining, but it does do funny things to your bladder. I think it's not quite sure what it is actually. Is it your body making water to heat up? I'm not quite sure, but anyway, not conducive to, shall we say, highly competent photography, at least not when you're on a trail run, because people keep falling over. All right when it's posed, not so bad, but when things start happening, all you have to do is point and click. This is in the middle of Grisdale Forest. Gentleman lying down there is a man called Stan Harper from Keswick, a bus driver. One of the biggest disasters, of course, is losing your seat. This poor lad was absolutely knackered and on his knees, and his seat fell off. Oh dear. But Garban Pass, it's dry, sunny. But the entertainment still doesn't stop. One clutch lever gone. Not recommended to do this with an SP370, which weighs about the same as a small block of flats. Walnut Scar again, one slight mistake and you're up the wall. It's Jim Souter from West Yorkshire, I think. Yet again, bus driver from Keswick. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. This little sequence serves to demonstrate how people help one another. It's a little stream or a beck over around Alston Way. That's not good for your wedding tackle. But you'll notice a gentleman in a checkered crash hat. His name's Ted Chapman from Kendal. When anybody ever fell off or went into a hole or a stream, he always helped out. Not in that case though. Poor old Nigel Webber had really mired his DT in that one. That gentleman's called Pete Denby, who had a gents outfitters in Kirby Stephen. Always looked rather smart. This little lane out to Bretherdale was always very pleasant. One of the delights of trail riding in those days, and I suppose even now, I don't know, was the time to stop in a lovely warm spot and take your jacket off, let it cool off a bit, do a bit of fettling, then gently set off again. This is across Burkett Fell, top end of Mallerstang towards Highway. Of course, going down Whittlemoor is a damn sight better than trying to get up it. Interesting sequence now, because this is the beginning of a lane called Great Wold, runs close by the Ribblehead Viaduct. Quite easy at first, a little bit of tarmac, stony farmyard. Run along railway sleepers by the Settle Carlisle Railway. It's quite easy really, because it's time to glance about, look at the things that are happening, like this little artificially cascaded stream or beck, presumably done when the railway was built, and even natural cataracts. But looking about does have its pitfalls, literally, because this is what happened to Alan Dent. Gazing up, plop, straight in. Good example of a flying W on that occasion. Good trail riding tip: never carry latex puncture repair cans on your handlebars. If you ever go down a hole like I did and your chest hits the can, it bursts and puts latex all over your bike, and it took months and months to get it off. A lot of photographs of people lying about on grass. The main reason being, of course, that when you're on the move you can hardly expect people to stop and pose for you. That's why it's either lying down in the grass or up to the handlebars in mud or water. Lovely lane though, Great Wold. Once went riding in Lancashire, and this was an extraordinary lane, quite famous I believe, called Rolling Moor. Runs out of Rochdale, and at first it sets off like a normal stony bridleway, then suddenly changes and becomes cobbled. An extraordinary ride is this. I mean, right over the top of the moors, riding on cobbles. Very, very odd feeling. And then when the cobbles run out, it's flagged. If you look carefully, you can still see the grooves in the flags worn by the old cart tracks, or wheels I should say. But Garban Pass. It's Christmas time, and these two characters, Alan Dent, Peter Dixon from Windermere, and I all worked in the building trade, and we had a fortnight off at Christmas, and it became a tradition to, shall we say, nip over Garban Pass, Stile End, Long Sleddle, and go to the pub at Bampton for what we called a metre of sausage. But the two great characters of these two, I always refer to them as Hinge and Bracket. Great sense of fun. To give you a good example, right at the top of Garban Pass, Alan Dent's little 125 Honda fell over. Its prop stand sank into the mud, and the tank embedded itself on the only piece of railway line for about 50 square miles. Now I thought it was funny, and Peter Dixon thought it was funny, but why Alan thought it was funny, because it was his dinge tank, I've no idea. But that gives you some idea of what they were like. A lane long gone here maybe, it's Moor Divok. Ullswater in the background. But they were rather prone to strange things like, if you show me yours, I'll show you mine. But all this, shall we say, arsing about, for want of a better word, did disguise the fact that both of them were very good trials riders. Which is more than can be said for poor old Mike Sayer. Gatescarth Pass. Hey dear, David and Kathy Howe, now they're two names to conjure up. But this one, Alan Dent again on Walner, suddenly deciding that he had to break wind suddenly. But to get back to Gatescarth, this was a bit of an epic day, was this. There'd been some really nasty weather, very, very heavy rain, and it had run down the road and developed into a small ravine. Now this chap, I think his name was Reg Armstrong from Kirby Stephen, decided, why I don't know, but he decided that he would ride in it rather than on the outside. Now once he was in it, he couldn't get out. And it took 4 of us to get the damn thing out. But the other side was like a glacier. Absolutely sheathed in ice. Nobody but nobody escaped. Norman Phoenix from near Appleby slid down about 50 yards while his bike stayed where it was. Happy days. Mind you, you don't need ice to fall off. King Crooks from Ulverston could do it anywhere. Bone dry and flat calm. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. And there were other hazards, of course. Like missing bridges. On a dark night, that could be very, very nasty. Now then, here's a good example of good old Hinge and Bracket. Plop a TY175 into a deep bog. Pull it out backwards, and then do the self-same thing a few yards further on, where there's an old bit of rope. Now the problem is, why is it that one tries to pull it out backwards while the other tries to pull it out frontwards? Wonderful couple. But of course when it's rocky, like this lane above Starbotton in Yorkshire, well, life becomes a little easier. That's one of the original TY250s, very thirsty. So this chap decided to carry a gallon can of petrol everywhere. And just in case anybody who doesn't know the lakes and thinks that it's full of nice stony lanes like that last one, it isn't. This is a right little swine. Another trail riding tip. When standing the bike on its prop stand, always try to ensure that you have a stone underneath it. Otherwise, a bit of embarrassing when there's somebody with a camera. Another trail riding tip, always try and choose the right gear for the terrain ahead. Because if you're in too high a gear and it stalls, go splat. Clutch lever's gone again. And also try not to take too long a dab, especially on the inside of a curve, because recovery from this sort of position is practically nil. But on the other side of Coniston from Ornoscar, there's a lovely track up from High Nibthwaite. Sit in the sun and watch steam yacht gondola plying up and down Coniston Water. Lovely lane, which Gatescarth in winter isn't. Did I say these two were good trials riders? I think I take it all back. Mind you, in winter even a tarmac road like Rhino's Pass can be challenging. Big thing about winter is that you ride across boggy ground on a crust. Now break through that crust and it's not funny. But when the sun's shining, you're riding over from Tilberthwaite into Little Langdale. Wonderful. Time to take the kids out. Sometimes on the back, like Roger Harris is there. Not quite sure who this was. The gentleman pushing the bike was a plumber from Windermere called Pat Brosnan, while the one on the red bike on the left is the other half of Hinge and Bracket. But poor Pat did tend to fall off quite a lot and spent more time sitting down than riding. But Mike Sear put his little lad on the petrol tank. He'll be grown up now. Alan Dent always did have a little bit of style. But at Hodge Close there's a lovely large flat area just to one side of the large quarry, and it's an ideal time to stop and reflect, have a brew, have a fag. They were happy days. Happy, happy days.